Dead America. Tales from New York. The Construction Worker. By Derek Slayton. Chapter 1. Day 0. 6:37 a.m. Westbury, New York. Vinnie walked down the street in the pre-dawn stillness of the night, pulling his heavy-duty jacket a little tighter as the chill of the morning cut through him. He was tempted to break open his thermos of coffee to warm himself up, but he resisted the urge, knowing it was going to be a long day on the job site. Despite only being in his early 40s, Vinnie had already put 2 decades into his construction career. From his early days of following the old-timers around, he was always the hardest worker on the job site. It was that work ethic that helped carry him up to foreman with the company he had been with since the beginning. While that meant a higher paycheck, affording him the ability to provide for his family, it also meant early mornings, especially on high-profile jobs like the one he was walking towards. As he got within a couple of blocks of the site, his phone vibrated, indicating a text message. "If this is one more guy calling out, I swear to God I'm going to clean house," Vinnie muttered, digging deep into his pocket to grab his cell phone. Despite being only a few months old, the phone had multiple cracks on the screen, a plastic case that was barely holding on, and a trio of mystery stains that not even the most powerful industrial cleaner would make a dent in. "Son of a bitch," Vinnie cursed, resisting the urge to throw his phone down the street as he spotted the text message from another one of his crew. "That's 4 guys calling out today. We're only on day 2 of this job, and we're already a week behind schedule." Vinnie began typing out a response filled with choice 4-letter words, but took a deep breath before deleting it. They're good at their job and rarely call out. "Just suck it up, man," Vinnie contemplated for a moment before typing out "feel better" and hitting send. It wasn't exactly what he wanted to say, but he knew it was what he needed to say. After a few more blocks of walking, he spotted the job site, a dilapidated 3-story building on the corner of the street. The former office building had sat empty for years, but was now slated to be restored to its former glory. At the moment, however, the first floor was missing all of its windows and doors. The only thing keeping people out was the temporary tall chain-link fence surrounding the structure. As Vinnie approached the gate, he spotted another mid-40s construction worker standing beside it, nursing a cup of coffee. Vinnie had known Charlie for most of his life, goofing off in school together before working their way up the ranks of the construction company. "Oh, I know that look. Let me guess. Somebody called out," Charlie remarked, taking a sip of his coffee. "Morning, Charlie. And not just somebody. We're down 4 guys today," Vinnie replied. Charlie let out a sigh as he drank more of his coffee. "Truth be told, that don't surprise me much. I had to send a couple boys home early yesterday from that job down on the water." Vinnie gave his lifelong friend an incredulous look. "You know we're behind on that job, right?" "You didn't see those boys, Vinnie." "They were dead on their feet," Charlie responded. "We've all been that way, Charlie. If we didn't work through it, we'd never get a job done on time," Vinnie argued. "There's a difference between working through the exhaustion and being a danger to yourself and others. These boys could barely stand, and frankly, I didn't want to do the paperwork for an incident," Charlie explained. Vinnie thought about it for a moment before finally nodding in agreement. "All right, Charlie, I trust your judgment. Come on, let's get in here and get rolling." Vinnie pulled out his keys and unlocked the gate, swinging it wide open. The entire fence was flimsy, held in place with sandbags, but it was a good enough deterrent. "By the way, how's your boy doing?" Charlie asked. "He's having a rough go of it," Vinnie admitted. "Might be the same thing that's going around and taking out our crew," Charlie suggested. "I hope it's not that bad. But if he's not feeling any better by lunchtime, Betty is going to take him to the doctor," Vinnie said. "Well, if you need to go handle anything, I got you covered. The only thing waiting on me at home is a bottle and basketball," Charlie offered. "If I had to watch your team play, I'd drink too," Vinnie joked. Charlie laughed as he gave Vinnie a playful middle finger. The two of them walked through the opening of the building where the front door would eventually be put into place. Over to their right against the wall sat a metal tool chest that was locked up tight. Vinnie fumbled with his keys for a moment, getting the container unlocked and opened up, revealing a treasure trove of tools: battery-powered drills, saws, and a multitude of manual tools. "So what do you want us to get started on first today?" Charlie asked. "Let's finish tearing down that interior wall on 3. After that, we can worry about." Vinnie was interrupted by a woman screaming from just outside the building. Both men exchanged a confused look before they heard it again, quickly followed by a familiar voice yelling out, "We need some help out here." Jay's voice echoed through the air. Both Vinnie and Charlie broke away from the crate and rushed back outside into the darkness. Standing by the gate was Jay, one of the younger workers on the site. He waved frantically towards his coworkers, garnering their attention. "What's wrong, Jay?" Vinnie called out. "Come on, some lady's in trouble and Travis needs our help," Jay responded. The 3 men got out to the sidewalk, looking down the next block and spotting the commotion. A young woman was being assaulted by a man while Travis struggled with a second one. "Get your damn hands off of her," Vinnie shouted, leading the charge as the trio rushed down the street towards the fight. Travis managed to grab his attacker by the throat, pushing him back so that he could deliver haymakers to the man's head. Normally, one punch from the hulking Travis could be more than enough to down someone, but this man just kept standing. Vinnie spotted this and rushed to his man's aid, quickly getting behind the attacker and wrapping his arm around its neck. "You done messed up now," Vinnie growled, spinning the man around as he thrashed about, accidentally stepping off the curb and causing them to tumble. Vinnie drove the man's head straight into the pavement, an audible crack resonating through the air as the skull shattered. Meanwhile, Charlie and Jay rushed towards the woman, who was bleeding from several wounds on her arms. Before they could reach her, one of the creatures attacking her lunged forward. The ghoul smacked her battered arm away before biting into her neck. A horrific screech filled the air as the woman cried out, her pained scream soon muffled as blood filled her airway. "What the hell?" Charlie exclaimed. At the sight of the attack, Charlie flew into a rage, rushing towards the creature that had grievously injured the young woman. He lowered his shoulder and drove it straight into the creature's chest, lifting it up off the ground and pushing it backward. A moment later, he heard the zombie's ribs crack as he slammed it against the wall. The ghoul thrashed about, seemingly unaffected by the broken ribs. Charlie recoiled when the zombie lunged towards his shoulder with its mouth, forcing him to act. Charlie shoved the creature into the wall as he jumped backward. The zombie immediately darted forward, arms outstretched as it attempted to grab onto Charlie, who went into attack mode. With a forceful smack on the shoulder, Charlie managed to spin the ghoul around, shoving it face first into the wall. Despite the cracking of bone and teeth against the brick, the creature continued to thrash about, never indicating that it felt any pain at all. "I need some help over here," Charlie shouted. Jay rushed over, grabbing one of the thrashing creature's arms while Charlie did his best to contain the other one. While they were dealing with that, Travis rushed over to the injured woman, who was holding the gaping wound on her neck. "Just hang on, you're going to be okay," Travis assured her. Travis pulled out a rag from his back pocket, pushing it against the wound in a futile attempt to stop the bleeding. His eyes locked onto the woman's, her expression filled with terror, as she knew this was the end for her. Stay with me," Travis pleaded. Travis continued to beg the woman as he pushed harder onto the wound. Despite his best efforts, the light in the woman's eyes faded. It took a moment for Travis to recognize that she was gone, tears forming in his eyes as Vinnie walked over to him. With a firm yet comforting grip on his shoulder, Travis finally let go of the woman, collapsing into a seated position beside the body. "You did everything you could do, Travis," Vinnie said. Travis sat there in a stunned, nearly catatonic state as he looked down at his blood-covered hands. He struggled to get the words out as he spoke. "I don't know what happened, boss. We were walking to the site and we heard this scream. This lady was just minding her own business and these fellas just rushed her. I just don't understand," Travis stammered. "This city can be cruel sometimes," Vinnie responded. "Hey, we still need help over here," Charlie called out. Vinnie looked up and spotted Charlie and Jay struggling with the creature. Even though it was pinned against the wall, it was thrashing about so violently that it threatened to break free. "I'll get the cops up here," Vinnie decided. "Or just cave his head in like you did with yours," Charlie suggested. Vinnie looked back to the man he had tackled, a knot of worry beginning to form in the pit of his stomach. He knew he was in the right, but a dead body was worrisome. "Well, what's done is done," he muttered, letting out a sigh as he reached into his pocket for his phone, quickly dialing 911. By the time he put the phone up to his ear, the loud disconnect tones were blaring. "This call cannot be completed," the automated message droned. Of course, Vinnie groaned. As Vinnie tried to dial again, he heard movement coming from just a few feet away. He looked down at the ground, seeing that the woman who had bled out moments earlier was beginning to stir. "Travis," he said urgently. His words fell on deaf ears, as Travis was still in a state of shock, staring out into the street in a daze. Vinnie began backing up as the deceased woman reanimated before his eyes, her arms and legs twitching back to life. "Travis, get back," Vinnie shouted. Travis finally snapped out of it, turning around towards the woman on the ground as he noticed movement. His shock soon gave way to terror as the woman's dead eyes locked onto his. "What the hell?" he exclaimed. Before Travis could react, the zombified woman pounced, lunging forward and grabbing onto him. The man barely had time to react before she pulled herself on top of him. His scream pierced the air as she sunk her teeth into his shoulder. "Travis!" Vinnie yelled, springing into action. He rushed forward and delivered a forceful kick to the side of the woman's head. The impact was enough to send the creature flailing to the ground, taking a chunk of Travis' flesh along with it. "We have to get back to the site." Chapter 2. Vinnie watched as the zombified woman quickly pulled herself up off the ground as if nothing had happened. She let out a guttural moan before rushing towards him, a frenzied look in her eyes. Vinnie sidestepped her assault, smacking her as hard as he could on the back, sending her careening into the road. Between the shove and awkwardly stepping off the sidewalk, she tumbled to the ground, landing hard on the pavement. Vinnie picked Travis up off the ground, who was in a daze and instinctively holding his shoulder wound, which was bleeding profusely. "What the hell do we do with this asshole?" Charlie shouted. "Shove him to the ground and run," Vinnie replied. Charlie glanced over to Jay, who was terrified but locked into the moment. "On two. 1, 2. Both men stepped back from the wall, gripping the creature tightly and yanking it backwards. With a quick turn and forceful shove, they sent the ghoul careening off the sidewalk, stumbling to the ground alongside the female ghoul. The two men took off running, Jay rushing ahead and grabbing Travis on the other side, helping Charlie get the injured man to relative safety. As the four workers rushed down the street, they could hear the footsteps and moans of the ghouls behind them. Despite having a half-block head start, the men saw their lead vanish quickly as the zombies moved with haste. Charlie brought up the rear, a few steps behind the others. As he ran, he spotted a large plastic garbage container sitting outside of a building. In a single motion, he grabbed and yanked it back towards their pursuers. Charlie glanced back as he continued running, seeing the male zombie get tripped up by the trash can, buying them a few precious seconds. As the group got closer to the job site, they could see movement on the next block. Several shadowy figures sprinted towards them, drawn to their heavy footsteps on the pavement. "Get inside the gate now," Vinnie shouted. Vinnie picked up the pace, he and Jay lifting Travis off the ground and rushing towards the gate as the creatures closed in. As the others got inside the perimeter, Charlie lagged 10 yards behind, with the female zombie quickly gaining ground. He knew he wasn't going to make it inside the fence before she caught up to him, and with the other ghouls rushing towards them from the opposite direction, he only had one move he could make. With only 5 yards to go, Charlie could feel the bloody fingertips of the ghoul on the back of his shirt. With a deft move, he spun around, grabbing the creature by the wrist and pulling her ahead of him. Charlie managed to keep his footing as he continued to run, grabbing the zombified woman by the back of the shirt and driving her forward through the opening in the fence. As soon as they were through, Jay slammed the gate shut, locking it up just as the other creatures arrived. "Need some help here," Charlie yelled. Charlie drove the ghoul forward, their momentum pulling them off balance. Both of them fell forward, with the large construction worker landing on top of the woman, his grip still firm on the back of her shirt. As she flailed about, he struggled to keep her pinned down, knowing that if she broke free, it would be trouble. "Somebody give me a goddamn hand," Charlie shouted again. Charlie didn't have to wait long for help to arrive. Vinnie came rushing out of the building, holding a battery-powered drill with a thick, foot-long drill bit attached to it. Without hesitation, the foreman took a knee right beside the zombified woman and drove the tip of the drill bit into the back of her head. With a trigger pull, the drill sprung to life, and a split second later, bone and brain were being splattered in every direction. The gruesome attack only lasted for a second before the ghoul fell silent. Vinnie yanked the drill from her head before looking over to his longtime friend, both of them wearing confused and frightened expressions. "Not pulling any punches, are you, Vinnie?" Charlie asked. "The bitch took a chunk out of Travis, and I figured you didn't want to be next on the dinner menu," Vinnie replied. "Self-defense 100% of the way, brother." "That's what I'm going to tell the cops when they get here," Charlie said. "I don't think they're coming," Jay interjected. "What the hell makes you say that, Jay?" Vinnie asked. "Because one of them's already here," Jay replied. Jay backed away from the gate as the other two got up from the ground beside the dead woman. The three of them stared out towards the gate as three creatures thrashed violently against it. One of the ghouls in question was tall, muscular, and wearing a bloody police uniform. The three construction workers stood there in stunned silence, attempting to comprehend what was happening. "Well, that explains why 911 didn't pick up," Vinnie said. "What in the hell is going on, Vinnie?" Charlie asked. "I don't know, Charlie. I don't know," Vinnie replied. As the three of them continued to stand there, staring at the trio of ghouls trying to break into the lot, they heard footsteps and moans from the corner across the street. 4 more creatures, drawn to the noise, let out moans as they sprinted to join the others at the gate. As they crashed into it running full steam ahead, the construction workers saw the flimsy chain-link fence begin to give way under the weight of the ghouls. "If we don't do something, they're going to get in here," Charlie said urgently. Vinnie raised his drill up to the ready, blood running down onto the handle as a chunk of brain remained stuck to the top of the drill bit. "You better grab your tools then, because it's time to get to work." Charlie and Jay nodded as they rushed off into the building. As soon as they crossed the threshold, they spotted Travis, who was propped up against the wall, doing his best to hold a rag onto his shoulder wound, desperate to stop the bleeding. "What's going on out there?" Travis asked weakly. "More of those things showed up," Charlie replied. Travis started to pull himself up off the ground, only to slip and fall back into the wall. Jay rushed over to him, grabbing onto his limp hand and putting it back on the shoulder wound. "Just sit tight, buddy. We're going to take care of it." "I can help," Travis insisted. "Yes, you can. You can help by pushing down on that bite so you don't bleed out," Jay said firmly. Travis let out a frustrated grunt, knowing that Jay was right. He nodded as he continued pushing down onto the wound, the blood pouring out through the rag. Jay stared at the wound for a moment before snapping out of it when Charlie tapped him on the shoulder with a drill. "Come on, we got work to do," Charlie said. Jay grabbed onto the makeshift weapon as he stood up from Travis, who was fading in and out of consciousness. "I'm worried about Travis," Jay admitted. "I know, so am I," Charlie said. "But if we don't stop those things at the gate, we're going to end up just like him. Now come on." Jay nodded as he glanced back at Travis one last time before rushing out of the building. As they got back out into the open, they witnessed Vinnie yelling a string of curses as he pressed the trigger on his drill. "Get it, asshole, get it." Vinnie continued to yell as the drill bit cracked through the forehead of a ghoul, sending blood splattering back onto the construction foreman. When he yanked the drill bit out of the creature's head, it dropped to the ground in a heap, only to be replaced at the gate by another creature. Without missing a beat, Vinnie lined the tip of the drill bit up with the forehead, pushing it forward as he pulled the trigger. Vinnie yelled out, doing his best to keep himself psyched up for the violence, not wanting to think about the specifics of what he was doing. Jay and Charlie rushed towards the gate, getting to it just as several more creatures slammed up against the back of the pack. Their collective weight lifted the fence nearly a foot off the ground. Rather than attack, Jay jumped up as he got close to the chain-link fence, throwing his body weight into it at a support post and pushing it back down to the ground. Charlie went straight into attack mode, however, joining Vinnie on the line and drilling into the foreheads of ghouls. Blood and brains splattered everywhere as the 3 construction workers dropped creature after creature. Never a dull moment in this industry. "Is there, Vinnie?" Charlie asked. "No, sir," Vinnie replied. As the three men continued cracking skulls, more and more zombies rushed towards their position, drawn to the collection of moans and drilling. Despite their concerted efforts, the ghouls continued to grow in number, pushing the fence further and further off the ground. "This thing's gonna go unless we do something," Charlie warned. Vinnie looked around the area, spotting some 2x4s stacked up against the building. "Jay, get those boards up." Jay turned and spotted the boards, setting his drill on the ground before rushing over to them. He grabbed as many of them as he could carry, struggling to keep them in his arms as he moved back towards the fence. Jay dropped them to the ground in a clutter, grabbing one and angling it towards the top of the gate, planting the back end into the ground. While there was no support on the pavement for the wooden plank, the constant force that the horde was providing was enough to keep it in place. "We need more," Vinnie shouted. Vinnie and Charlie continued drilling skulls as Jay grabbed another board, repeating the process on the other side of the men. As he got the 2x4 into place, he looked down the street, spotting another dozen creatures rushing towards them. "Oh my God," Jay muttered. Jay snapped out of it, running back to his drill and joining the others on the line. The next couple of minutes were a blur to Jay, filled with a confusing combination of yelling, blood splatter, and zombies attempting to push down the fence. While it didn't appear as though they were winning the battle against the sea of zombies, they were at least dispatching enough to prevent being overrun. As Jay remained focused on the next zombie in front of him, he caught a sudden, violent movement out of the corner of his eye. Charlie lurched forward, bouncing against the fence as he was tackled from behind. "They're inside," Jay shouted. Jay turned, ready to attack the creature that had tackled Charlie, only to freeze when he realized it was Travis. In that brief moment of paralyzed fear, the zombified Travis delivered a bite to Charlie's forearm. As the chunk of flesh was ripped from bone, a deafening cry of pain drowned out the moans from the ghouls. In that moment, Vinnie turned to see his lifelong friend writhing in pain, trying to break free from the grip of their now zombified coworker. Reacting on instinct, Vinnie turned and kicked at the head of Travis, landing boot to skull and sending him careening to the ground. Before the creature could get back to its feet, Vinnie darted forward and shoved the drill in its direction. The tip pierced the eye socket, easily sliding through into the brain as Vinnie pulled the trigger. The zombie's body convulsed as the brain was scrambled by the high-power tool, quickly falling motionless as Vinnie let go of the trigger. Struggling to comprehend what was happening, Vinnie was in a daze. The carnage at his feet drew his attention, even as Jay attempted to pull it back towards the fence, which was beginning to topple over. "Vinnie, Vinnie," Jay continued calling out, desperate to get Vinnie to snap back into the moment. Chapter 3. Jay continued shaking Vinnie, who was still in shock from the surprise attack on Charlie. Realizing that shaking wasn't doing the job, Jay delivered a forceful punch to Vinnie's arm, causing him to recoil. "What the hell?" Vinnie exclaimed. "We have to move," Jay shouted. Jay spun Vinnie around, showing him the fence that was in the process of tipping over and the few dozen creatures on the other side that were on the verge of getting inside. Vinnie's eyes grew large as he finally snapped out of it, immediately turning and grabbing Charlie by his good arm and yanking him up. Charlie let out a pained yelp as he got to his feet, but quickly got moving with the others towards the building. The three of them rushed through the open doorway, looking around frantically for some place to go. "Damn it, they really didn't pick a good day for this," Vinnie muttered. Vinnie and the others looked around the first floor, seeing that every single exterior door and window had been removed. Most of the interior doors were gone as well, along with several walls. As they attempted to figure out where to go, they could hear the zombies outside getting louder as they pushed through the fence. They turned just in time to see it topple over, allowing the creatures to pour through. Vinnie looked beside the door, spotting a large piece of heavy-duty plywood. "Give me a hand," he called out. Vinnie and Jay grabbed the wood, dragging it over in front of the wide-open door and dropping it across the entrance. While the wood was weak, it was chest-high and provided a bit of an obstacle to the oncoming creatures. Charlie and Jay got on opposite sides of it, using their body weight to hold it against the wall, while Vinnie got down onto one knee, using his shoulder to reinforce the middle. As the ghouls slammed into the plywood, the construction workers could hear it beginning to snap almost immediately. This isn't a long-term solution, Jay shouted. Vinnie, where in the hell are we going? Charlie asked. Vinnie looked out across the building, hoping to spot a place where they could hold up. After several tense moments, an idea sparked. In the middle of the building was a narrow stairwell that went up to the second floor. The walls around the stairwell had been torn out the previous day, leaving a precarious journey up them for man or creature that wasn't sure of foot. We're going to make a run for the stairs, Vinnie decided. What the hell kind of good is that going to do us? Charlie asked. There's more 2x4s at the top of the stairs. We might be able to hold them off, Vinnie explained. As they talked, they could hear and see the cracks in the plywood continue to grow. What the hell? It can't be any worse than here, Charlie conceded. When I say go, I want you two to make a run for it, Vinnie instructed. Vinnie, we ain't. Charlie started. Vinnie interrupted, yelling as loud as he could. Yes, you are. You get up those stairs and you be ready to cover me. Vinnie looked his friend in the eyes, silently pleading for him to listen. It took a moment of contemplation before Charlie nodded in agreement. You better be close behind, Charlie warned. Vinnie nodded as he watched the other two men break away from the board. As soon as they took off running, he could feel the full force of the mob on the other side, which nearly knocked him over. This ain't your best idea, Vinnie, he muttered to himself. He let out a sigh, taking a moment to compose himself before making his escape. He focused his attention down the dimly lit building as his two friends made it to the stairs. You gotta move now, man. Move. Vinnie let out a motivational yell as he pushed off of the plywood, which immediately collapsed under the weight of the creatures. The wood hit the ground so fast that it clipped the back of his boot, nearly tripping him up. However, he managed to keep his footing. Vinnie ran as hard as he could through the construction site, hearing the zombies close behind him. The ghouls were within a few feet of him, their extended arms grasping for him, when Vinnie caught a break. The lead zombie reached out too far, causing it to tumble forward and topple over to the ground. As it slammed onto the concrete, the next few creatures were tripped up by the clumsy zombie, causing an undead pileup. Taking advantage of the miscue, Vinnie got to the stairs and bounded up them, getting halfway to the second floor before the first ghoul began to ascend. As soon as Vinnie planted his feet on the next floor, Jay took his position at the top, wielding a 2x4 like it was a lance at a medieval jousting competition. He lunged forward as hard as he could, driving the blunt end of the wooden plank into the chest of the first creature. The impact sent the zombie falling backward onto its undead comrades, tumbling down and off the sides of the stairs. While there was a lot of moaning, Jay could hear the cracks of the bones and skulls as they hit the ground. Jay stayed in his attack stance, ready to deliver another forceful strike as soon as the next creature got within range. Meanwhile, Vinnie gasped for air, struggling to catch his breath as Charlie came over to check on him. I've known you a lot of years, Vinnie, and I have to say, that was one of the stupidest things you've ever done, Charlie remarked. You're welcome, Charlie, Vinnie replied. All Charlie could do was laugh at the bravado coming from his friend. How's the arm? Vinnie asked. Charlie looked down at his wound, giving it a good once-over before responding. As crazy as it sounds, it's not the worst injury I've ever gotten on a job site. Vinnie thought about it for a moment before recoiling from his memory. The Hoffman job? Yep. It hurt like a son of a bitch and I had to take 3 months leave to recover. But on the plus side, I'm pretty sure I scarred some healthcare workers for life, Charlie said. We all gotta have our hobbies, I guess, Vinnie commented. Charlie chuckled as they walked back over to the top of the stairwell, where Jay was busy knocking zombies back down to the first floor. How are we looking over here? Vinnie inquired. I'm holding them at bay for the moment, Jay responded. Do you want me to take over? Vinnie offered. No, I want you to figure out what we're going to do. Because this is working for now, but it's not going to work long term, Jay said. Vinnie nodded as he walked over to the front of the building. The sun was beginning to come up, rays of light coming through the openings where the windows were supposed to be. He hoped for the best as he approached the front, but the moans outside got him thinking about the worst. Vinnie stepped to the opening at the front of the building, gazing down upon the street as the dawn sunlight bathed it in an amber glow. The normally beautiful scene was tarnished by the presence of dozens of ghouls rampaging through the streets. Vinnie watched as most of the zombies followed the others, coming through the fence and into the building. However, a block down, an unsuspecting person walking out the front door of their building drew the attention of half a dozen creatures. In a flash, they sprinted towards the man, who looked up at the last possible moment, catching a glimpse of his attackers as they tackled him to the ground. Vinnie looked away as they ripped into his flesh, but forced himself to turn back towards him after a few moments. Charlie could see the disgusted look on Vinnie's face as he walked up. "Do I even want to know?" Charlie asked. "Some poor bastard walked out of his building before looking out the window," Vinnie replied. Vinnie pointed down the street towards the pack of ghouls that were ripping and tearing at the man. "I could have done without seeing that," Charlie said. "Me too, but I need to know," Vinnie said. "Know what?" Charlie asked. Vinnie pointed back down to the carnage as the ghouls ran off in search of another victim, leaving the mangled corpse of the man on the ground. After several moments, the man began twitching, reanimating before pulling himself back up to his feet and running off. "I thought that was the case, but I really didn't want it to be," Vinnie said. Vinnie looked over to Charlie, who had gone completely pale. It took Vinnie a moment to realize why. "Oh hell man, we don't know if you're going to end up like that poor bastard." "We also don't know that I'm not," Charlie replied. "Look man, we don't even know what the hell's going on. So before you start worrying yourself over something that could very possibly be nothing, let's focus on the bigger problem. Namely, how in the hell are we getting past that?" Vinnie pointed down to the front entrance of the building, which had around 20 creatures all trying to push their way inside. Charlie cocked his head, struggling to come up with anything resembling a viable plan. "Well, we got a couple of drills and a hell of a lot of 2x4s. We can try and wall off the stairwell?" Charlie suggested. Vinnie walked back over to the stairwell, where Jay was still sending zombies tumbling back down to the first floor. He gave it a look, seeing that the wooden support wall surrounding the stairwell was intact. He began nodding at the idea. "Jay, we're going to start building a barricade against the stairwell opening here," Vinnie decided. Jay thought about it for a moment before shaking his head. "No boss, we have to get the hell out of here." "I know you're scared, Jay, but we need to make sure those things don't get to us," Vinnie insisted. "Look around, Vinnie. Do you see any food or water up here? I've already seen 4 cops, 2 paramedics, and a handful of nurses trying to get up here, so whatever is going on out there is bad. Like end of the world bad. If we don't get out of here now, I don't think we ever will," Jay argued. The mention of nurses caught Vinnie's attention, who immediately went into a bit of a panic as he pulled his phone out from his pocket. "What the hell are you doing?" Jay asked. "I gotta call Betty," Vinnie replied. Jay shook his head dismissively before turning his attention back to the zombies in the stairwell. Vinnie scrolled through his contacts before hitting Betty's number. A few seconds later, it began to ring, and ring, and ring. "Come on, answer. Answer," Vinnie muttered. As the call went to voicemail, Vinnie hit redial, listening again as the phone rang and rang and rang, eventually going to voicemail again. "Damn it," he exclaimed. "Vinnie, I'm sure she's fine, probably focused on taking care of your sick boy, or glued to the television watching the news," Charlie reassured him. "I gotta get to her, Charlie," Vinnie insisted. "I know, and if I'm being honest, that's probably where we all need to go," Charlie agreed. Vinnie thought about it for a moment before nodding in agreement. "I'm 8 blocks away. That's going to be a hell of a run." "But it's one we can do," Charlie encouraged. "I still don't know how in the hell we're going to do it, though," Vinnie admitted. "We'll figure it out. But first things first, we got to put up something on those stairs," Charlie said. "Again with the stairs. Are you kidding me?" Jay exclaimed. "Look, Jay, whatever we do, it's going to take time to do it. And I don't know about you, but I'd much rather not have those things bearing down on us while we do it," Charlie explained. Jay thought about it for a moment before nodding. "Okay, fine. Start at my waist and work your way down. I'll handle those things while you do." Charlie and Vinnie nodded in agreement before they sprung into action to build their makeshift barricade. Chapter 4. Several minutes went by as Jay continued to smack zombies in the chest with a 2x4, sending them careening down the stairs. While he defended the second floor, Vinnie and Charlie built a makeshift wall by securing 2x4s into place, drilling them into the supports beside the stairwell door. As they laid the last one in place, just above belt level on Jay, they stopped to admire their work, with Vinnie gripping the top beam and shaking it violently. Despite the heavy-duty shaking, it didn't break loose. Vinnie looked at their handiwork and said, "Not my finest work, but it'll hold up for as long as we need it to." Charlie asked, "Do we have any idea how we're getting down from here?" Jay responded, "Hey Vinnie, take over for a minute. I have an idea." Charlie and Vinnie exchanged a glance and a shrug before Vinnie grabbed a plank of wood. "I got you, kid. Do what you gotta do," Vinnie said. Jay delivered one more forceful shove to a zombie, sending it tumbling back into the others before stepping away from the line. He tossed his makeshift weapon aside before wiping his brow and walking towards the back of the building with Charlie following close behind. Charlie asked, "Are you hanging in there, kid?" "I was about to ask you the same thing," Jay replied, motioning towards Charlie's arm, which was bleeding through the makeshift bandage. Charlie cracked a smile, trying to play off his fears. "It's just a flesh wound. If you work in this industry long enough, you'll get more than your fair share," Charlie said. Jay responded, "You and I both know it's more than a flesh wound, Charlie." Charlie retorted, "It hurts just like one, so that's what I'm rolling with." Jay began to protest, "Yeah, but..." Before Jay could continue, Charlie snapped, raising his voice before quickly containing it, but still speaking in a forceful manner. "Jay, I know I'm probably fucked and this bite is going to turn me into one of those things. But I can't do anything about that at the moment. What I can do, however, is help you two get out of here in one piece. Now will you shut up and let me do that?" Jay stared into Charlie's eyes, seeing the pain and fear behind them. He gave Charlie a soft nod before smacking him on the shoulder, employing a perky tone to show that he had moved on. "Come on, old-timer, let's see if my hunch is right," Jay said. Charlie let a soft smile creep out, thankful for the topic shift. That smile quickly faded as they walked over to the garbage chute. "You have got to be out of your mind," Charlie said. Jay replied, "Nope, far from it." The two men stared at the makeshift garbage chute, which was an expandable plastic tube that ran down to the ground floor and into a dumpster that sat out back. Charlie noted, "You know this thing's not a slide, right? It goes straight down into a pile of debris. Nails, splintered wood, and a whole lot of other nasty stuff that you don't want to be slamming into at high velocity. The walls are sturdy enough that we can press up against them and slow our descent. Even with one good arm, you should be able to take enough off in order to land safely," Jay explained. Charlie was skeptical. "There's no way this is happening, Jay." Jay challenged him, "Then by all means, tell me how we're getting down to the ground, because I just don't see it. The front of the building isn't an option because there's too many of those things. The sides of the building aren't much better since we'd have to come down outside the fence. At least back here the dumpster is contained, so if we draw attention to ourselves, we'll at least have some protection." "What about ladders?" Charlie suggested. "They're all at the front of the building," Jay replied. Charlie tried another idea. "What about?" Jay interrupted him with a shake of his head. "It doesn't matter what you're about to say because whatever it is, we don't have it up here. Almost all of our supplies are on the first floor, and the stuff we do have up here isn't going to get us down." Charlie looked around the room, frantically trying to find another potential way down to the ground floor. After several flustered moments, he let out a sigh, shaking his head in defeat. "Damn it, I hate it when you're right," he admitted. Jay tried to lighten the mood. "Don't worry, it could be worse." Charlie asked, "How in the world could it be worse?" Jay replied with a grin, "We could be on the third floor." Charlie thought about it for a moment before letting out a chuckle and smacking Jay on the back. "Come on, let's go get Vinnie," he said. The two of them walked back to the stairwell barricade, where Vinnie was busy knocking zombies back down the way they came. Vinnie asked, "So what did you figure out?" "We're going out the trash chute," Jay informed him. Fantastic. This day just keeps giving gifts, Vinnie said sarcastically. Jay instructed, you two get ready to move. I'm going to get some tools. Charlie protested, we already got our drills, what more do you want? Jay didn't respond as he walked over to a mid-sized toolbox sitting on a table. He threw it open, rummaging around in there for several moments before pulling out 2 large pairs of wire cutters. There's no gate on that side, so once we get down there, we're going to have to cut our way out. Unless you want to climb up barbed wire-topped fencing, Jay explained. Charlie and Vinnie exchanged a glance, shaking their heads at the thought. Vinnie said, did that once in my youth, never again. Charlie asked, so once we hit the ground, what's the plan? Jay looked over to Vinnie, who shrugged and motioned over to the young worker. You're doing a bang-up job so far. Don't let me stop you now, Vinnie encouraged. We're going to draw attention to ourselves landing in the dumpster. I'm hoping that those things inside will continue to be distracted by the stairwell, but we need to keep a close eye on it. So Charlie, while Vinnie and I cut a hole in the fence, you're on watch, Jay explained. I can do that, Charlie said confidently, brandishing his drill and giving it a couple of trigger pulls, making the bit spin for a split second, showing his readiness. And if they make the mistake of coming our way, I'll make them regret it. Vinnie affirmed, all right, we know what we're doing. You two get into position, and I'll be right behind you. The 2 others nodded as they made their way to the trashed chute, stopping just before it. Vinnie stood at the wooden barricade at the top of the stairs, gripping his 2x4 tightly. Okay, B, I'm coming home to you, Vinnie said to himself. Vinnie stepped forward, delivering a forceful blow to the chest of the lead zombie, driving it backward onto the others and creating a domino effect. He glanced over the barricade, watching as the ghouls collapsed on top of one another, with many rolling off the side of the stairs and slamming to the concrete below. Vinnie gave the 2x4 a shove, sending it down the stairs before turning and running towards the trash chute, knowing that they didn't have long before the zombies would be pressing up against their barricade. Come on, I don't know how long that thing is going to hold, he urged. The 2 others nodded at him as Vinnie swung his legs over the edge of the trash chute. He glanced down it before dropping through, hoping to see what he was landing on. I can't see a damn thing, Vinnie muttered. He let out a horror chuckle before looking over to the others. I'll see you boys on the other side, he said. Vinnie nodded as he slid down the chute, pinning his boots to the edge in an attempt to walk down it. While that plan was unsuccessful, it did a good job of slowing him down. The end of the chute caught him off guard as it ended a good 5 feet above the dumpster. One moment he was gripping the sides of it with his boots, and the next moment he was in free fall. His boots crashed down onto wooden debris, sending a cloud of dust up in the process. It took him a moment to wave it away, allowing him to get a lay of the land. 5 yards from the dumpster was a doorway, which led straight into the heart of the building. Vinnie kept a close eye on it as he moved to the edge of the dumpster, expecting a creature to be rushing through it at any moment. Much to his relief, nothing came, and he was able to hop out of the dumpster without incident. As he stared intently towards the door, he heard a clicking noise coming from above. Looking up, he spotted Jay and Charlie, prompting him to give them a thumbs up. Vinnie readied his drill as the other 2 slid down the trash chute, getting to the dumpster with ease. Jay stayed in the dumpster, helping Charlie land due to his injured arm. As they made their way to the edge, however, the noise they made drew the attention of a wandering ghoul just inside the door. It poked its head out, immediately locking onto Vinnie, letting out an excited moan before sprinting in his direction. Vinnie didn't have time to think, only react, raising up his drill to defend himself. With a squeeze of the drill and a forceful jab, he jammed the spinning bit into the zombie's eye. The creature fell limp as Vinnie ripped the drill from its head. As it smacked to the ground, the trio could hear moans and rushed footsteps echoing from the building. Get to the fence, Vinnie shouted. Vinnie and Jay rushed over to the fence, pulling out their heavy-duty wire cutters, and began working on making a hole through the chain link. As they scrambled to break free, Charlie readied his drill in his good arm as he walked over to the doorway. A lump formed in his throat as he saw a mass of flesh rushing towards him, barely 20 yards away and closing quickly. Oh hell, Charlie muttered. He looked down at his wound, thinking back to what happened with Travis and the others they had seen bitten. "You're more than likely dead either way, Charlie," he thought. He nodded to himself, as if he was accepting his fate. He glanced back over his shoulder as his two friends worked frantically to get through the fence. "Hey, Vinnie, you get back to Betty, you hear?" Charlie called out. Vinnie turned just in time to see Charlie step into the doorway, drill at the ready. "Charlie," Vinnie shouted. Vinnie got up to chase after his friend, but before he could take a single step, Charlie was gone, buried underneath a sea of creatures. He stood there, in shock and pain as he watched his friend fighting until his last breath. As the ghouls ripped at his flesh, he punched up with his drill, catching a zombie in the eye socket and taking it out with him. Jay shouted, "We're through, come on." Jay reached back, grabbing Vinnie by the shoulder and shoving him through the opening. As Vinnie moved on instinct, Jay looked back to see Charlie being ripped to shreds. "Thanks, old-timer. Rest easy." Chapter 5. Jay slid through the opening in the fence and got up beside Vinnie, who was still in a bit of shock. He grabbed the older foreman by the arm, dragging him towards the street. "Where are we going?" Jay asked. Vinnie was still in a daze, trying to get a handle on things. Finally, Jay grabbed him by the shirt collar, pulling his head down so they could be eye to eye. "Vinnie, I'm going to say this once. Get your shit together, or else I'm going to leave your ass here. Now I'm sorry about Charlie, but we can mourn him later. Right now we need to get to your house. Now, where are we going?" Vinnie took the words to heart, especially the threat. Jay was a lot of things, but a bluffer wasn't one of them. "Okay, yeah, sorry," Vinnie replied. "Don't apologize. Just tell me where we're going," Jay insisted. "We need to get over one block, then turn south. It's a straight shot, 7 blocks down. Red brick building on the right-hand corner of 45th. "Then let's move," Jay said. Jay raised up his drill, making sure that Vinnie saw it. It took a moment for Vinnie to do the same, but once it was up, Jay gave it a tap with his, as if to signal their readiness for battle. Jay led them out from cover, darting across the street and into an alleyway. They moved up as quietly as they could, avoiding the debris on the ground. As they approached the end of it, they heard moaning coming from behind them. Vinnie turned and spotted a lone zombie running down the alleyway, bumping into all of the debris that the construction workers had taken great care to avoid. He stood his ground, waiting for the business suit-clad man to get up to him. As the creature got close, Vinnie rushed forward, lowering his shoulder and planting it straight into the creature's chest. The impact knocked the zombie right off its feet, landing hard on the ground. Vinnie didn't waste the opportunity, taking a knee on the ghoul's chest before driving the drill bit straight into its forehead. With the threat eliminated, Vinnie joined Jay back at the edge of the alley. "How are we looking?" Vinnie asked. "Suspiciously quiet," Jay replied. Both men looked out at the street, not seeing any movement. No cars, no people, and most importantly, no zombies. "What do you say we pick up the pace?" Vinnie suggested. "I'm always up for an early morning jog," Jay replied. The two men broke from cover, running as hard as they could down the sidewalk, completely unconcerned for the noise they were making. They covered the distance quickly, getting 4 blocks before they could hear or see any signs of trouble. As they got within a couple of blocks of Vinnie's apartment, they could hear a massive, collective moaning coming from the distance. Jay put his hand up, getting Vinnie to slow down. They stopped in their tracks, listening intently and trying to figure out where the horrifying sound was coming from. It took them a moment before they realized that it was coming from the next block. The two of them inched up cautiously, getting to the corner bodega, which was locked up tightly. Jay poked his head around the corner before quickly reversing course. He put his finger over his mouth as he saw Vinnie about to speak, letting him know to keep quiet. Jay used hand signals to get Vinnie to look around the corner. As he inched up, Vinnie gripped the drill tightly, wanting to be prepared for whatever awaited him. As he glanced around the corner, he lowered his drill at the sight. Hundreds of excited zombies were pressed up against one another, all of them trying to get into an apartment building. As Vinnie looked out at the sea of ghouls, he spotted movement coming from the second-floor window. A young man, not more than 20, waved a white shirt out the window, trying to get anyone's attention that he could. Even from a distance, Vinnie could see that he was distressed. "Come on. There's nothing we can do for the kid," Vinnie said. Jay nodded solemnly as Vinnie led them out from behind cover. They moved with a deliberate pace, however, they were very careful about the noise that they made. As they reached the other side of the street, Jay saw movement out of the corner of his eye. He turned to see one of the ghouls at the back of the pack taking notice of them. "Move, move, move," Jay shouted. Jay picked up the pace ever so slightly, taking a couple of heavy steps to get to the side of the next building. However, the damage had been done. The zombie let out a moan before it began pursuit. Vinnie poked his head around the corner, spotting a dozen creatures rushing towards them. Rather than warn Jay, he simply turned and took off running. It took Jay a moment to register what was happening, but once he did, he took off running. He managed to get half a block down before the ghouls made their way around the corner. Jay looked up half a block ahead to Vinnie, who was moving like a man possessed. "Wait for me," Jay pleaded. Jay's plea fell on deaf ears as Vinnie continued pumping his legs down the street. Jay peeked over his shoulder, spotting the ghouls that were quickly catching up to him. Up ahead, he noticed that Vinnie veered off into the street, honing in on a 4-story red brick building on the corner. Jay tried everything he could to catch up, but Vinnie was too quick. When Vinnie reached the door, he pulled out his keys, momentarily fumbling with them before finding the proper one to unlock the outer door. He jammed the key inside, jiggling it around for a moment before the door opened. As he got inside, he turned back to Jay, who was 30 yards away. The creatures, however, were right on his heels. "Come on, kid, get in here," Vinnie shouted. Vinnie held the door open, waving the kid on, hoping and praying that he could make it in time. Jay got to the sidewalk, jumping up from the street to the curb. However, as he landed, his right ankle twisted as the boot caught an edge. The young construction worker stumbled forward, slamming face first into the ground just a few yards short of the door. Vinnie instinctively moved through the door but caught himself when he saw the mob of ghouls pounce on top of Jay. Distraught, Vinnie pulled the door shut, hearing it latch into place as one of the zombies ran right by the sidewalk feast and over to the door. He watched as the young female zombie smacked against the glass, smearing blood all over it from her bite-marked arms. Vinnie stared at her for several moments as a few other creatures joined the push to get inside the building. He looked each one of them up and down, seeing that most of them had bite marks, while others didn't have a scratch on them. Part of his mind wanted to figure out why, but all of that thought went away when he saw Jay pull himself up off the ground. Rather than join the fray by the door, the zombified construction worker heard a noise in the distance, sprinting off in search of it. Vinnie let out a sigh as he forced himself away from the door. "Get your ass up to Betty," Vinnie muttered to himself. Vinnie continued that mantra under his breath as he walked into the main lobby of his building, which itself was a mini war zone. Tables were overturned, blood stained the walls and floor, but thankfully, there was nobody around. Vinnie walked over to the stairwell door, throwing it open and beginning the walk up to the 4th floor. As he reached the 3rd floor landing, he heard banging sounds coming from the other side of it. Curious, he opened the door ever so slightly, seeing 4 zombies pressing up against the door at the end of the hall. That wasn't quite closed all the way. A moment later, he heard a scream as the door gave way. Rather than subject himself to more horror, Vinnie gently shut the door before continuing up to the 4th floor. As he opened the door, he was relieved to find the hallway empty and quiet, with no signs any trouble had taken place. Vinnie casually walked down the hallway towards his apartment. However, as he approached, he could hear banging sounds coming from within. "Please, Betty, be okay. Just be okay," Vinnie whispered. Vinnie put his key into the lock and turned it, popping the door open. With his drill at the ready, he stepped inside, anticipating the worst. Just inside the door was his son's room, where ferocious banging resonated from within. His heart leapt into his throat as he heard the moans joining the audible assault. Vinnie stood there, heartbroken at his son's fate. However, fear gripped him when he saw blood staining the doorknob. "Oh God, Betty," Vinnie muttered. Vinnie looked to the floor, seeing a trail of blood that led into the living room that got bigger as it went along. He rushed away from the door and ran down the small hallway to the main living space. "Betty," Vinnie cried. Vinnie laid eyes on his wife, who was sprawled out on the blood-stained couch. She had several bite marks on her body, one of which was near her throat. The large foreman dropped his drill to the ground and rushed to her side, picking up the top part of her body and cradling her in his arms. "Betty, please be okay. Please be okay," Vinnie pleaded. His frantic words were enough to get her to open her eyes. "Vinnie, you made it home," Betty said. Her voice was weak, the life draining from her body as the blood continued to flow from her wounds. "Of course I made it home. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world. I'm always coming home to you," Vinnie assured her. Betty raised her bloody hand up, gently touching his face as he let down his guard, tears beginning to flow from his face. She tried to wipe it away from his cheek, but she didn't have the strength to. Her hand fell limp into his lap as he picked it up and held it to his heart. "I'm never going to leave you, Betty. I'm never going to leave you," Vinnie vowed. Vinnie sat there, sobbing as he felt the last ounces of life exit his wife's body. As he cradled the love of his life, he looked across the living room to where his drill had fallen. His first instinct was to rush over and get it so that he could protect himself. However, as he looked down at his lifeless wife, he knew that he wouldn't have it in him to put the drill bit into her skull. And even if he could summon the strength to do so, he wouldn't want to go on without her. Vinnie sat there, cradling his wife and stroking her hair, repeating the same thing over and over again. "It's you and me forever, Betty. It's you and me forever." The end.